Good evening. I am the narrator, and welcome to my parlor. Tonight's story is In a Foreign Land. My country is the envy of the known world. Its history is long and illustrious. It has never been invaded, conquered, or colonized. It has never been the vassal of an empire. Our wealth and resources make us ideal for such, but our troops are of repute. We always win without a shot being fired. Likewise, we have never invaded others, though we easily could. Our morals are impregnable. Reciprocity is our top principle. The sovereignty and self-determination we relish for ourselves we apply to others. We rally our troops only on behalf of those less fortunate. Like all my fellow citizens, I was born and raised in comfort. I have never lacked necessities or luxuries. I attended our finest schools and studied diligently. By my coming of age, I was well prepared to serve my country. My gift is education. My diploma is therein. Before I proceed, I must speak of a land far from and unlike mine. It was settled at the same time and has existed as long. The similarities end there. Its people are of a different stock than mine, than most, in fact. Their origin, if it was ever known, is lost to history. Their language, though simple in grammar and syntax, is inscrutable to outsiders. Still, they look much like us and their neighbors. Their history is checkered. In their earliest days, barbarians raided them. Invasions followed, then conquest and subjugation. Reduced to chattel in their own land, they broke their backs for foreign rulers. Only in modernity did they at last gain sovereignty, and not by their own efforts. Their masters simply tired of them and withdrew. They soon declared independence and founded their own state, and have since largely blocked out the world. No diplomats, no foreign embassies, no involvement in world affairs. Their economy is self-sustained. Both imports and exports are banned. Above all, foreigners are denied entry. Be they immigrants or vacationers, students or guest workers, a massive stone wall surrounds their borders. Naturally, they have an aura of mystery. Academics speculate. Youth fear them. Parents invoke them to control their offspring. Offers have been made to address their poverty and roundly declined. I had just graduated college with no resume. The Department of Foreign Affairs mailed me, telling me of a teaching position at a girls' boarding school there. Its administrators were keen on foreign instructors. I was perplexed. Why had they suddenly opened their doors? How did they know of me? Why me above so many others? Whatever the answers, I had no fear. They had no history of diplomacy, nor one of aggression. Upon consideration, I agreed. It would be my first job, not at all what I had pictured. I wrote a letter of acceptance and mailed it to the Foreign Affairs Minister, who sent it to them. 1 week later, I waved goodbye to my family from a dock. I then boarded the humble ship, the first of my country to see this foreign land. My voyage was historic. Our papers covered it in detail. I would return with details. But to me, it was simply my first job, so I thought. The trip was pleasant, unscathed by storms and tempests. It was also quick, more so than one would expect at the distance. Though I had never seen it in person, I couldn't mistake the wall as it appeared. It stretched as far as I could see. In its center stood a wooden door 2 soldiers guarded. The captain docked and I descended. I turned back to him and we swapped salutes. He then resumed and turned for home. My feet touching their sand for the first time, I showed the guards my identification card. They nodded and opened the door. Before me lay brown fields. Above, a dense gray sky. The path forth was dirt, wide enough for modern cars. I saw ahead a horse-drawn carriage approaching. I assumed it was my ride. The steeds paused. The drivers nodded as the guards had. I laid my suitcase in the back and sat, greeted and thanked the two. They only resumed their task. The ride went quickly, though was somewhat disconcerting. They never spoke. In fact, they ignored all overtures. The brown field seemed endless, broken only by occasional gnarled trees. Truly, this wasn't home. I was naive to expect otherwise. At last, the school appeared ahead. Before it stood 2 brick walls and a metal gate. The drivers paused and I stepped out, my feet returning to the odd dead soil. They and their horses turned and left in silence. Once again I produced my card, only to find it needless. The gate opened on its own, as if aware of my arrival. The land beyond was just like that before. I wondered of their farming. The sky was still gray, the clouds thin and wispy. The school loomed before me, a vast Gothic structure, centuries old. Its walls were brick and its windows were darkened. Stone gargoyles, horned, clawed, and winged, stared from its gutters. The front door opened and a man emerged. He was tall in a gray suit and bowler hat. He saw me and nodded before our eyes had even met. I assumed him the headmaster and that silent nods were custom. I responded in kind and walked to the door. We stepped in and it closed behind us. Before us lay an immense hallway with white walls and a wooden floor lit only by oil lamps. I knew by now not to speak. They wouldn't respond. I didn't mind, as I was the only foreigner they had ever seen. I said nothing as I followed him down the hall. Brown doors lined those adjoining, with bronze knobs and stained glass windows. Employee offices. Plaques showed their names and titles in their alphabet's abstract letters. He showed me my office, small but serviceable, at the end of the main hall. He then led me up a weathered staircase, each step creaking beneath our feet, to my room. Once again it was small but serviceable, and smelled of must. These were their best accommodations. This, as I reminded myself as I thanked him, to no response. And he walked off. He never returned, and the day passed without event. I seemed unneeded, nor did I need any information, until my first class the next day. That night I slept with marginal success. Footsteps sounded from the hall, but they were not normal. They were stilted and dragging, as if the person had one broken leg. I assumed and dismissed it as the janitor. When I awoke, I went to my door, only to find the man already there. Peering out the windows, I saw only gray. The sun was absent as before. Used to bright blue, I disliked this, but for them it seemed the norm. The man led me to and down the stairs, to a hall I had yet to see. Then to a room, where he opened the door and beckoned. I peeked in and saw a desk, a chalkboard, and a row of wooden desks, so I nodded and entered. He turned and went in silence. I stood at the board when a note began to play. From what instrument and where, I didn't know. It droned, loudened, and seemed to echo and reverberate. I realized it was their bell. Soon as it resolved, the patter of tiny feet sounded from the hallway. They appeared one by one in a line, moving stiffly and staring blankly. Each wore the same brown dress, black shoes, and gray stockings. Each wore the same ponytail. They sat quietly, with none of the fuss I had expected, and looked to me. I was taken back. Their docility was a relief, but it seemed unnatural. I strained to understand, then gave up and began the lesson. This proved difficult. They raised and lowered their heads as one, even writing in rhythm with each other. Above all, none said a thing throughout. In time, the note sounded again. They rose, lined, and marched out, their shoes clacking as one. None stopped or looked back. I had no time to be perplexed. The man had returned as if from nowhere, and beckoned. He led me down the hall to a wide wooden door with glass windows. The girls stood before it. It opened for them. Again he beckoned, and I followed. It was the cafeteria, wide and drab, with large windows at routine intervals. The floor bore a series of symbols important to their culture. Tables lined the floor. Oddly, there was no counter, only a swinging door at the far end. The girls kept their line. One would enter the door and return carrying a plate. The others would stand and wait. They sat quietly when all had been served. The man gazed at me and nodded, then vanished behind the door and came back with a plate. It bore delicacies from my country. I was not surprised. But something was amiss, and not the 3-pronged fork, the stuff itself. While it tasted like the foods I knew, its texture was strange, rubbery and elastic. Still, as their guest, I didn't complain. When I finished, the man, without asking, took the plate back to the kitchen. I surveyed the commons. The girls ate as they walked and wrote. As one, even their bites were synchronized. Then a hiss sounded, like that of reptiles. Craning my ear, I wondered its source before realizing they were it. I watched closely. At first, thinking my eyes had deceived me, I was at a loss. Were those tiny proboscises flitting from their mouths? The man saw my bewilderment, but said nothing. Lunch ended, and the girls filed out in their manner. I didn't watch. The man looked to me and opened his mouth. From it flitted a larger proboscis. "You're relieved of your services for the day. Do as you wish," he creaked. Shocked, I obliged, again at a loss. I was dismissed with nothing to do. Nothing had been specified of the building and its grounds. Given what I had just seen, I assumed I could roam as I liked. After it, nothing more could shock me. So I went to see my surroundings in detail. I left the commons and descended the main hall. I turned and walked up and down those adjacent, each with classrooms just like mine. There I glanced in each. Dead-eyed teachers droned in their strange tongue. Dead-eyed students did just as mine had. Doubtless they saw me, but none seemed to care. I found the front door and heaved outside, returning to the brown grass and gray sky. There I scanned the field and saw monotony. Indeed, it seemed a waste of time. I then noticed ahead a second building, of the same brick but taller and slimmer. How it had slipped my eyes I knew not. I'm usually observant. What's more, I heard a faint sound from its direction, so crept forth. Its windows were tinted, its interior all but invisible. I could see only outlines therein. I pressed my ear to the wall. The sound came from therein, guttural gurgles and burbles. I peered into the window. In outline was a massive form, the building's height. A large head bobbed in a squat body. 2 rows of limbs sprouted from its sides. A mouth opened and closed. Was this native fauna, the school mascot? The sky darkened. Night would soon fall. I had no time to speculate. The man was likely seeking me. Less suspicion roused, I returned. The threshold was empty. I sighed in relief and awaited the man's return, only to find I was on my own. Unable to sleep, I continued exploring, keen to see the whole interior. To the left was a hallway I had yet to. Though sure it had nothing of import, I crept forth. At the stairwell, I heard their steps and ascended slowly. At the top, the hall was lit dimly. Only shadows were visible. Nonetheless, I recognized my hosts, rows of tiny silhouettes moving in formation. Before them was a taller, squatter figure. I pressed my back to the wall and slid forth in silence. Thus far, they seemed not to notice. Had they, they didn't care. I soon neared. They didn't respond. Squinting, I saw a door larger than the others. The man slowly heaved it open. The room beyond was brightly lit, even without bulbs or torches. On its back wall was a hole through which a large trunk emerged, ending in a massive round sphere, moist with something. Saliva? I strained not to recoil, but it was futile. The sphere split in 2 halves and opened like a clam. The girls entered in silk pajamas, revealing strangely sinewy forms. Each lay within the thing. When they all had their eyes closed and it closed over them. The man heaved the door closed and faced me, visibly confused by my discomfort. I spun and ran. I didn't escape, as none pursued me. The gates were luckily unlocked. I bustled through the fields to the dock. In the distance was a ship from an ally of my country. Such luck. At home, I was welcomed with surprise, without hesitation. My friends, relatives, and newsmen bombarded me with questions. Why so early? What was it like? What were they like? Why are you back so soon? I declined to answer. No one has gone since.